Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the Research Method Seminar series by EDICa. Today, we are going to talk about the literature review and method and the Black women's academic experience. The seminar will be led by Dr. Yaz, and I'll be introducing her in some time. Before I take it forward, some of the code of conduct and housekeeping. Uh, we are dedicated to provide a harassment-free experience for everyone, regardless of the gender identity and expression. So we will expect that. Uh, do not tolerate any kind of harassment or any kind of a abusive language in any form or sexual language or imagery. Any kind of waiver from that particular point, we may ask remove you from the particular seminar. You might be sanctioned or expelled based on that. Um, for the accessibility part, we have also activated the captions, so you can activate in case you want to have the captions at a particular time. Just click on the three dots at the bottom of your Zoom screen and selecting the closed caption option, so you will be able to see the live caption on a particular time. Please use the question and answer function in a particular type of a question, and we'll keep a tab on the question. So I'm supported by Lizzie here, who will be helping me on that particular part. For this particular seminar, can I request that any particular questions you can keep putting in, and we'll be answering them at once Dr. Yaz completes her seminar, and then she'll be answering all the questions that are there. So all questions will be answered at the end. We have also enabled the chat for the community discussion. So please keep that in mind. There will be 35 minutes of presentation followed by question answer and the discussion on the presentation. Uh, Talking about EDICa, EDICa is initiative funded by UKRI with additional support from British Academy. Some of the key actions that EDICa is involved is based that we are based on the research evidence based for inclusive careers across the research and innovation system. We are focused on removing barriers experienced by marginalized group and support to access and thrive in chosen career, conducting interdisciplinary research. And one of the most important thing is we focus on co-design approach, where our focus is to work with stakeholders and people with lived experiences. About the research seminar series, because there is a lot of changes that have taken place in the way the methodology works around equality, diversity, and inclusion, and there has been never been a greater focus on this particular area. The EDICA Research Seminar Series is dedicated to equip researchers and practitioners with the tools and frameworks and approaches around it. We have had seminars on social network analysis, machine learning, artificial intelligence, impact practices, which talk about these particular areas in terms of how EDI research has been changing. We have upcoming seminars which are focused on co-production in the context of neurodiversity, writing an equality, diversity, and inclusion plan for funding, menstruation at the margins. I'll request Lizzie to put up the particular registration link in the chat. For all our particular seminars, including this one, you will be able to access these particular seminars with transcripts later on our website and also on a YouTube channel. This is our website, and we'll place up the link in the chat within some time. Um, Talking about today's seminar, Dr. Yaz is Principal Lecturer and Director of Academic Professional Development at the Center of Education and Teaching at the University of Westminster. Our focus is on the research area and contributing on that particular side. I'll now hand it over to Dr. Yaz. Dr. Yaz, all yours.
Thank you very much. I will share my screen. Just right. 1 second. Okay, Siddhartha, can you see my slides? Okay, great. Okay, good afternoon, everyone. And thank you to EDICA for the invitation to speak about the paper Negotiating Spaces, Black Women Academics Experiences in UK University. So the article that I speak about today was published in Higher Education Journal, and it was written by myself and Dr. Naomi Alamelli, who is a senior lecturer in social care at the University of Northampton. Unfortunately, Naomi is currently on maternity leave and is unable to present with me today, but I hope that I'm able to capture her thoughts as well as mine in this presentation. So my presentation today is in 3 parts. The first part, I want to provide you with a bit more context and understanding, which frames the research and lived experiences of me as a Black academic. I want to also provide you with a bit more detail about who I am, the issues surrounding the findings of the article, And then I want to touch upon the research questions which guided the published article alongside the methods used. So, which was obviously a literature review, as the title of this presentation suggests. I'll speak about the limitations, benefits and challenges of this research method, and I'll go over the findings from this article and put forward some recommendations that you would have seen if you read the article as well. I'll also end on talking about some of the next steps that I'm taking, and also some of the next steps that Naomi and I will take as part of this research. Okay, so I just wanted to spend a few minutes drawing on some of the things that I'm involved in, which are essential to my experience as a Black woman academic, my experience, and also in framing the research, my part of the research for the article. So a bit more background about me. I've been an academic since the age of 21, when I started teaching in higher education in post-92 university in East London. After finishing my master's, and from there I worked in numerous universities, including private higher education institutions, Russell Group universities, and also post-92 universities as well. So in this time, I spent a number of years in different roles within the university, within the HE sector, including lecturer, senior lecturer, research fellow, EDI lead, course and module leader, and now I've moved more to, I suppose, the hybrid role where I'm Director of Academic Professional Development. So I have less involvement with students and much more involvement with colleagues and staff. I've worked extensively with students in this time, doing quite a few different projects related to the racialized awarding gap, understanding the experiences of Black students, and also done quite a lot of research in relation to Black academics and racially minoritized academics within the institution I currently am in, but also more generally across the sector as well. Outside of this, I've worked in industry, primarily in research. When I finished my doctorate in 2007, I came out of academia to work in industry, having experienced quite a few challenges in a Russell Group university, some of which are echoed in the paper. As a result of not so positive experience, when I completed my doctorate, I founded a support network called GEMWA. Hopefully some members will be on this call now. And I established that in 2017 as a means of supporting racially minoritized women academics. And GEMWA exists primarily on Facebook, but we have a LinkedIn profile where we post. We have nearly 900 members in our Facebook group, and we offer peer support, job notices, and collaborative opportunities. And it's interesting because this is how this article came about. Naomi is a member of GEMWA, which is Global Ethnic Majority Women in Academia, and I'm also an admin and founder of GEMWA, and we came together as a result of that collective. So I was asked to touch upon some of the motivations surrounding the article, which I will go on to talk about in detail shortly. First and foremost, I'll say it was very much motivated by Naomi, as at the time she was finishing up her PhD, and her PhD relates very much to the themes that were uncovered in the article. It was also very much framed by my own personal experience, which I've touched upon earlier in terms of not having a great experience when I was doing my PhD in the sector and also as a student. And this included the following issues: barriers to promotion and opportunities, observing different experiences and opportunities whilst being a doctoral student at a Russell Group university. And this was supported by a fantastic documentary. I've not been able to find it anywhere on the internet, but I do remember watching it many years ago, where some colleagues, contemporaries at that Russell Group university were interviewed, and they talked about exactly the same experience that I had in terms of differential treatment. So it was very interesting that we had exactly the same experience there. It's also informed by my years as a visiting lecturer and the challenges that I experienced around this, including financial instability, lack of access to full-time academic opportunities such as training, and not having as much time as I would like to engage in research because you're focusing on earning money through being a visiting lecturer. So I now want to talk about what Naomi's motivations were for undertaking the work, and these were very much drawn from her own lived experiences of entering the sector and witnessing the visible and invisible underrepresentation of Black women academics. Her research on her PhD focused upon well-being of Black women working in university roles in UK and Canada, and her advocacy for anti-racism in terms of practice, race, gender equity as a senior lecturer in social care. So with that being said, let's move on to the article itself. So this is part 2 of the presentation. So our article was published just over a year ago, and it has had it's had actually passed now. It's had 6,000 accesses since it was published. And since its publication, we received really positive feedback from Black women academics and Black academics more generally about how the article spoke to their experiences in their universities. And that feedback hasn't just been from academics working in the UK, it's been globally as well. The article frames around a review of literature with the aim of addressing our central research question and sub-questions, which you can see on the screen. So the main question was, how have researchers discussed the experiences of Black women in UK universities? And our sub-questions were, what is the state of representation of Black women academics in professorial and leadership positions in the UK? And how do Black women academics cope with and navigate their experiences within the academy? So as I mentioned earlier, Naomi and I used secondary data through the use of a literature review to generate themes and insights into the research questions that I just mentioned. In doing this, we set date parameters for our search of literature, which was a 20-year search period between 2004 and 2024. However, we did include papers, scholarly research outside of these parameters if they were significant to the understanding of the intersectional experiences of Black women. An example would be Kimberly Crenshaw's work, for example, which was outside of the scope. So as the UK was our main focus, our main interest, we very much zoned in on research that was published with a UK focus. We did make some comparisons in the research with research drawn or data drawn from the US, South Africa and Canada. And this was very much in conversation with the editors of the journal. It's an international journal, higher education journal, and they wanted to have that comparative data for contextualization. So our approach to literature was that literature was left as a standalone point for reflection, with the paper drawing together to provide several points of recommendations, which you'll see at the very end of the presentation, but also of the article itself. So some more on the method in terms of the process that we went through. So our research questions were very much formulated by our research interests. Naomi's PhD, her research that she's currently doing as well, and also our knowledge of the literature and our own lived experiences. Literature search terms and the selection of relevant scholarly research were guided by the research questions that we proposed. And then the scholarly research was selected that fell within the parameters that I mentioned earlier, 2004, 24, and then also 2024, and addressed the areas of focus identified by the research questions. And then we reviewed our literature based on the relevance to address those particular research questions. And if they were relevant, research was synthesized, pulled together, and explored in the article. And then from then, we came up with a set of recommendations and action points for the sector and also for institutions that were drawn again from the literature, but also informed by our own experiences as well. So it's very important that I mentioned that our approach to literature review was not intended to be an exhaustive synthesis of research on Black women academics' experiences in the UK. As we mentioned in the article, we provide a scholarly overview of dominant themes in research related to Black women academics' experience in the UK universities. So that's very important to mention, and that's something that we disclosed in the article itself. So on to some of the values of the literature review in terms of how we used it. One of the main values was that it was we were able to complete the article without conducting primary research. This might seem a very simple benefit, but it's not to be underestimated. Gaining access to participants can be challenging, and I'm experiencing that at the moment in terms of one of the projects that I'm now involved in, and it relates to Black academics more generally. So using secondary data, focusing on secondary data, if it is there, which again can be a challenge when it's not there, can sometimes be a lot comparatively quicker to complete. But obviously there are some downsides to this. You're not focusing on the current and first-hand experiences of Black women academics, which I'll discuss on the next slide. Nonetheless, the literature review really helped us to provide an overview of a fragmented field by pulling together 2 decades of research with key seminal works included. We're also able to map the intellectual terrain, identifying dominant themes such as institutional racism, intersectional marginalisation, and career progression barriers, and also coping mechanisms of the Black women academics. Secondly, it helps us to identify authors and helps readers more so to identify authors for further exploration. For instance, through the review of literature, we cited authors who write extensively on the areas related to the article, Black women academics experiences, and they are spotlighted. Although the article may not go in as much detail as as in terms of, like, for example, having a whole page on one particular author. Readers are able to, through the article, identify an author or an argument put forward to explore fate later at a later date. And the third value is that as our focus was on the UK, we were able to provide a UK context focus with some comparative insight and broader contextualization in terms of, specifically in terms of related to different frameworks that are used within UK, US and South Africa to tackle gender inequality and also race inequality. So this enabled some areas where shared global challenges occur to be exposed, as well as UK specific systemic factors which were explored thematically in the article. Another thing is that through the use of the review of literature, we were able to translate existing knowledge into actionable recommendations. So moving just beyond the description or the review of literature to propose institutional strategies for EDI. Okay, so now I'll move on to some of the limitations. There were some obvious limitations when you conduct a literature review. Rather than conducting primary research or conducting a literature review that is has a systematic approach. So the limitation here is that we weren't able to capture first-hand narratives from Black women academics. However, we were very transparent about this from the outset and drew upon a wide range of literature, including conceptual, empirical, and autobiographical research to provide depth and richness in the article. So this approach really allowed us to bring together existing knowledge and identify dominant themes across the field, which is valuable for setting the stage for further research, which I'll talk about a bit later, but also providing an overview of some of the dominant themes for readers who are interested in the area or for senior leaders who want to know about this particular area and do something about it. So another limitation is that the review was not exhaustive. As I mentioned, it wasn't a systematic review of literature. We did not aim to include every single piece of literature available on the topic. Some studies may not have been included due to scope and also database limitations. But to address this, we did clearly outline that our 20-year time frame in terms of our scope of focus. We also intentionally incorporated seminal works outside of that particular window. And I felt that, and we both felt, that by being transparent about this, we aim to manage expectations and allow readers to see the work as an overview rather than an all-encompassing account. Another limitation is selection bias. So we did acknowledge our own positionality and how it shapes how we engage with, select, and also interpret the literature. So me as a Black woman academic, Naomi as a mixed heritage woman academic, we acknowledged our positionality and how it impacts how we read the literature, how we may interpret it, how we show up in terms of, analysing that data. So rather than ignoring this, which we certainly didn't, we adopted a reflexive approach where we acknowledged our own standpoint and how it influences the framing of this work. We have our own lived experiences, which I think both of us identified with quite a few themes that came out from the research. And it offered very much a lens of analysis that shaped the recommendations and the action points put forward. But obviously, related very much to the discussions in the article itself. Our article also primarily focused on the UK higher education sector, although, as I mentioned, we did touch upon the US and Canada as well. And this geographical focus could be seen as a limitation because the experiences of Black women academics can differ significantly in other geographical contexts. So to mitigate this, we did have a few comparative references, but we were very clear that the focus was on the UK. Okay, so another thing is because the article is very much a literature-based study, the findings cannot be statistically generalized. We were not claiming that the themes identified represent all Black women academics across the sector, because obviously there will be people who have totally different experiences. Instead, we framed the work as a thematic insight, something that highlights some of the key trends and challenges. Importantly, and I think it is important to mention, we translated these insights into practical recommendations for institutions, which was one of the main aims of our article and one of the motivations of why we were doing this as well. So there are some quite big challenges in doing this work and using the literature review as a method. The first is scarcity and fragmentation of literature. We found a limited amount of focused research on Black women academics, specifically in UK higher education, that related specifically to our research questions. There is a growing body of literature, but we found comparatively more research more broadly on BAME or racially minoritized academics rather than the Black women academic experience. I've mentioned positionality quite a few times and also my own experiences as a Black woman academic. And navigating this can sometimes be a challenge. Balancing a critical distance with our own personal experiences and identification with some of the themes and findings, which can sometimes be very fresh, can be challenging. This required us to carefully manage how we framed our findings, leaving the literature as a point of reflection for readers, and also moving through with those actionable recommendations. And I think the third challenge is very much in terms of where you present these findings. And one of them could be institutional sensitivity. An article discussing racism, sexism, misogynoir, and systemic inequities requires critical examination, which in the findings may yield defensiveness when presented in certain contexts. So, for instance, in university spaces, in some university spaces, not all, of course. So in driving the article forward, we provided, we used the literature to frame the arguments that were presented, but we also made sure that we had at the end very much some action points and recommendations based upon what was uncovered in the literature review and also in terms of our own lived experiences as well. So on to the findings. So pulling this all together, just to remind you, our research questions were: how have researchers discussed the experiences of Black women in UK universities? What's the state of representation of Black women academics? And also, how do Black women academics cope and navigate their experiences within the academy? So we uncovered quite a bit of themes. It's well known that there is a numerical underrepresentation of Black women academics. recent figures, which have progressed since the article was published last year, is that there are 83 Black women professors in the UK. That's of September 2024, and that's out of approximately 9,387. So we can see the underrepresentation there. Progress again is slow, and the experiences of striving to progress within higher education can be challenging for some Black women academics, as the findings show. And it's also challenging in terms of obstacles and opportunities as well. So figures and research also show that Black women are notably underrepresented in senior leadership positions. So that's not, professorships, professorial roles. This is in senior leadership positions, such as academic managers. This lack of representation, we could argue, can have a severe impact upon how decisions are made. For instance, the development of policies and strategies and institutional commitments which are inclusive and also impactful and positively impact racially minoritized and also Black women academics. So in research, we found that the landscape is marked by disparities, covert, gendered racism and microaggressions experienced by Black women academics. There was also research which highlighted themes surrounding the lack of institutional support for progression and professional development. And it's interesting because my next piece of research focuses specifically on that, and it is echoed in the responses that I've got so far from nearly 100 Black academics. So it's not just focused, this next piece of research that I'm focusing on, it's not just Black women, it's Black academics. So Black women academics experience structural barriers institutionally, with themes that opportunities were consistently obstructed, hindering promotions and exposure to promotional activity. So Black women academics are heavily concentrated in post-92 teaching intensive universities, which are well known for their heavy workloads. If you work in a post-92 institution, not all of them, but quite a few of them are very much teaching intensive in focus. And as a result of that, there's more of a focus on teaching, there's more of a focus on fulfilling student contact hours. And that means that there's not as much of a focus on activities and duties which can contribute to promotion. So research also indicated that there is an overrepresentation of Black academics and Black women in precarious contracts, such as fixed-term contracts and also hourly paid lecturer roles. This limits access to research opportunities critical for career progression. So when you are a part-time visiting lecturer, for example, you are concentrating for the most part on the teaching hours that you have, because that's the money that you have coming in, unless you have several different financial and income streams. Themes also highlighted the intersectional discrimination that were experienced by Black women academics, where they experienced intersectional disadvantage and also discrimination, with experiences of racism, sexism and microaggressions, which created additional burdens with marginalization, invisibility, which also coexisted with feelings of being very visible, hyper visible in academic spaces. So this is where their voices are marginalized, yet frequently subjected to increased scrutiny. And this ultimately results in bearing the weight of representing their identity in academic spaces, because they're very underrepresented. So we were interested in coping strategies of Black women academics. And we found in research that Black women academics tend to draw upon various coping strategies that can be seen within institution, but also externally as well. So various forms of networks were seen as a way of coping. And the article highlighted internal and external networks for support, solidarity, and bolstering feelings of, and the ability to be resilient in environments. And this includes support from racially minoritized staff networks, such as BME networks. I think I've gone over. Let me go back. Sorry. So that includes BME networks, racially minoritized networks, for instance, but also networks that focus on women's experiences, for example. But there are also networks that are external to the university, so outside of the university. And I just want to mention some of them. I mentioned Gemwa earlier, where we exist on Facebook and LinkedIn. There's also BIFON as well, and also Shine. There's also, I think, the Society of Black Academics as well, that are external networks to support Black academics and also Black women academics. So one of the issues with institutional networks that have been set up institutionally that allow all colleagues to attend, so networks that are Black networks or racially minoritized networks, for example, that are, within their code, for example, or they're joining instructions that allow everybody to attend or join, is that some Black women may not feel that those spaces are very safe in disclosing information or disclosing the challenges that they face. So that's another issue that's there. So if the space isn't very safe, disclosure of challenges, key areas that they may want to talk about to help them in terms of their promotion or survival within the sector, for example, they may have to look outside of those networks to seek help. So based on some of those findings, we moved beyond the theoretical discussion by offering some concrete points for action for the higher education sector and institutions. And these recommendations aim to provide starting points for universities and their leadership teams in addressing some of the issues discussed in the article. So we first advised relinquishing with the use of the term BAME, which has been heavily criticised. I know that some institutions do still use the term BAME. So one of the issues, and I've written elsewhere about this, is it disguises differences in terms of outcomes, experiences, and disparities. So where possible, we urged institutions, universities, to report on outcomes and experiences for racially minoritized groups separately due to differences across those groups and also in terms of experience, progression and representation. And a result of this, any interventions need to be targeted as opposed to a blanket BAME or racially minoritized intervention. It should be targeted to the needs of those particular groups. And then I touched upon this a bit earlier in terms of safer spaces or safe spaces. One of the other recommendations we had was that there should be exclusive safer spaces for Black academics and Black women academics for peer support, healing. This was seen as very important, and this type of intervention could form part of race equality charter action plans if funding is an issue, for instance, and can coexist with broader networks. So, for example, racially minoritized networks, BAME networks within the university itself. But the important thing here is that if these types of networks that exist that are exclusive to Black academics or Black women academics, they need to be constructed in consultation with Black women academics themselves in terms of how they look, in terms of whether they're going to be in person, whether they're going to be online, the format, whether or not they're going to be hosted. Also felt that inclusion was very important in terms of professional development opportunities, not readily available if, for example, colleagues, academics are on hourly paid contracts, for example. I thought this was very important in terms of making sure that even if you are on an hourly paid contract, that you have some of the same benefits that our colleagues and academics who are on full-time contracts have access to. So that would be professional development opportunities, CPD, for instance, as well. And in delivering this, flexible delivery is very important, and consultation is also important. So in addition to universities clarifying promotion pathways, we must look at leadership programs delivered within institutions. So some of us on this call would have been part of leadership programs that university delivers to women, or more broadly to racially minoritized women or Black women, for example. And I'll name some of them, because you would have probably have been on them. Aurora, Diversifying Leadership, and others. These are really great at giving us the time and the space to discuss the challenges that we have in relation to leadership and also in relation to our career aspirations. They also are really good at giving us access to an action learning set, for example, group coaching opportunities. And these are really, really good because they enable us to problem solve and co-create with people on that particular leadership program. But one of the issues that we found is that what happens next when you go onto these leadership programs? So when you return back to your university, is it a case of you having just gone on that leadership program and there's no sort of succession plan, some sort of plan for you to get access to different leadership opportunities and different CPD, which builds upon that particular leadership opportunity that you had just enrolled in? And then co-creation is also very important. So any interventions or activities that are aimed at Black women academics, and this can even be, if we wanted to look more broadly, for women academics, disabled academics, any intersectional aspect, it needs to be co-created. It needs to be co-created by those individuals that are going to benefit from that particular intervention. And one of the things that I'll mention a bit later on is that it's really important to, when those interventions are being rolled out, to think about the best suppliers to deliver those interventions. It's not always going to be the case that the usual suspects, the usual big organizations are the best fit to deliver those interventions. There are smaller companies, independent companies that can also support. So, as I just mentioned, smaller companies, independent companies, those owned by Black academics who have the lived experiences, could be consulted and should be consulted when those interventions are being rolled out institutionally. It does take a bit of time to do the research to find which organizations are out there, but it's a good use of time to do that. And we've just got some images there from one of the conferences that my university, University of Westminster, held in January, called Holding the Space. And it was a conference that aimed to shine a light and a spotlight on the work of Black academics and also Black PhD students. So in extension of the paper discussed today, Naomi and I are going to progress and do phase 2. So phase 2 of this research aims to tackle some of the limitations that were mentioned earlier. And in this phase of research, we want to explore effective university interventions that Black women academics have been exposed to or certainly experienced within their universities. And also we want to understand their involvement in EDI initiatives as well. So if you'd be interested in phase 2 of this research, which will be primary research, please do get in touch. My email is on the screen as well. And I mentioned earlier about some of the challenges in doing primary research and getting access to participants, for instance. And this was very much in relation to a second piece of research that I'm doing. And this phase 1 is based upon surveys. And this particular piece of work is called, titled Black Scholars, Line Management, Promotion and Opportunity. And this project aims to get a better understanding of how line managers can support the career progression of Black scholars. So it's not just Black women, it's Black scholars. And it's anticipated with this research that there will be a set of recommendations and action points which shine a light on the experiences of Black women scholars in the context of line management support and how line management support can be enhanced to support this group of women. So once both pieces of research are completed, they'll be published and they'll be shared widely and presented widely. So you can see also on the screen, I've got a QR code for the Black Scholars Line Management and Promotion Opportunity. Please do, if you are eligible, the eligibility is that you are a Black academic, you're a Black academic and you're also currently working in a university. And this is not just focused upon the UK. So, geographical location is unimportant. So if you'd like to get involved, please do scan that QR code and also either contact me as well. But you can access the actual form via the QR code. Okay, so thank you very much. I think I went over ever so slightly, for which I apologize. Thank you.
No problem, Dr. Yaz, because I think that was very insightful and clear. And there have been a lot of reactions and questions around it, but I'll ask you one of the first questions which Sylvia has asked, that she has been somebody who is self-funding attendee at relevant conferences, which is frustrating sometimes. But what about the younger colleagues? How will they develop, and how will the growth is going to happen? So that's one of the concerns that she has shared. What are your views on that?
Well, is it in terms of Black academics? How are they going to progress?
Yes, specifically the younger group, which is like early career researchers and who are new into the academic system.
I think there's quite a few different things. I think institutions, because it's quite clear there's an underrepresentation of Black scholars more generally within the universities itself. And there are also barriers in relation to PhD doctoral students and their completion, and also the differential experiences that some of them face. I think it's quite evident, and there is evidence out there to support this, that institutions really need to be doing more to support those that are coming up, as well as more established academics as well, because the evidence, the research is out there to support that there are challenges and there are barriers and there are obstacles that are there. So for younger early research career academics, it really is something that needs to be tackled by the institutions themselves, in terms of putting forward initiatives and that focus on the particular needs of those early research career academics. And that could be things like mentoring, it could be coaching, it could be access to research training, it could be them having their own conferences, you know, and the university sponsoring that and showing that they are behind that. There's that. But then there are also, and I alluded to that earlier, there are loads of, well, not loads, there are more and more external networks that are established. Bifan, Genoa, Shine, for example, and all of these networks support Black academics, racially minoritized academics, across career stage. So there are things that are out there, and I think that it's very important to utilize these networks, try and find peers, like-minded peers, and have your peer support, because that is something that's crucial in terms of self-care and also staying within higher education and thriving within academia as well.
That was really helpful. And one of the questions that has came is that there is not only less affordable time for research, but in the current climate, but also challenging to access funding. So how do we change this and advocate for change to access to funding and time both, because both are important when you want to take up a research journey.
Yeah, I think that the time aspect is an issue, and it's not an issue that is racialized, really. It's an issue that is more systemic. You know, if your university doesn't give you the hours to engage in that research, and you have a lot of teaching hours, or you have a lot of different administrative duties, then that time has to come from somewhere else. And that could be something that, you know, where you're working weekends or evenings or things like that. So it's within the realm of the institution to change that, in terms of allocating time for, it could be even you know, early research career, or colleagues who want to engage in research to engage in that research. In terms of access to funding, again, that is something that the research councils, the research organizations need to look into. They need to make sure that they are speaking to the Black academics. They are putting them very much at the heart of the conversation in terms of identifying what those barriers are. You know, is there something within the application? Is it something within the communication? You know, that they aren't really getting that information out there to that particular group of academics. What is it, you know, in terms of, you know, the barriers? Because statistically, and research shows that there are particular barriers for Black academics in terms of accessing fundings. So it's the research councils, the research organizations that need to make sure that they are co-creating strategies to make sure that they are engaging Black academics. It's not, you know, it's not a case of just the Black academics coming to them, because they are applying, you know, but that some of them are not getting access to
Yeah.
the funds. So what is it, you know, because the how can I put this? Things are not all the same for all academics. You know, there are different obstacles that are put in place for different academics. So it's about making sure, in terms of equity, that Black academics are going to have access to those funds. You know, should they be, you know, they've got worthy research and it meets the objectives of that particular call, that they have access to it. They need, these research organizations and councils need to understand that what those barriers are, and make sure that those barriers are lowered for the academics.
That was really helpful, and which actually leads to the next question, which is, when white people still hold on so much of the decision making power, uh, how how the concern is that how to fix the women narrative personal improvement does little to create change, but puts more pressure or more burden upon black women. Should the
Mm.
action points focus on the behavior of white people with a particular understanding on backlash, and how to avoid the root causes?
Okay, so there is strong taxation for Black women academics. Certainly doing a lot of EDI work or race work within universities, it does fall a lot on them. And I suppose in doing those types of work, one of the other things that I've constantly mentioned is that, if you are going to be engaged in EDI or race work, it needs to be something that is a promotional criteria. So it's something that is, if you are going to be involved in it, you are going to be recognised and rewarded for all your efforts. It's not something that's a silent duty. In terms of decision-making power and it, being predominantly white, we know, in terms of research and statistics, we know that this is how it is. It's very challenging, very, very challenging, because we do have all these recommendations, we have action points, but if those who are in, positions of power, decision making, are white, it's very difficult to get those action points through, not just mine and Naomi, but other action points. I think that race equality charter is perhaps one of the ways in which to mitigate this to a certain extent, because it's something that holds the university to account. And it's something that needs to be regularly reviewed. Not just reviewed when there is a renewal, race equality charter review. It needs to be reviewed all the time. And also in terms of any kind of interventions that are within the race equality charter, it needs to be something that is co-created by the beneficiaries, the Black women academics, for example. And it also needs to be something that is, I suppose, what's the word? It's something that needs to be evaluated. So just because you have an intervention there, it doesn't necessarily mean that it's something that is going to work. If it's something that isn't working, then it needs to be, okay, so what's wrong with this? What are we going to change? Because it's an ineffective intervention. So then there needs to be a holistic approach. Decision making and power, that's a very difficult thing to change, really. Doing this type of work is very valuable in terms of bringing forth the themes of secondary research, but also later on, what Black academics have said about this, and making sure that you're presenting these findings far and wide to the sector as well. But I think that, just to repeat again, that the race equality charter, because it is something that the universities sign up for, is a framework that is, they have on their website, that could be a way of making sure that there are solid initiatives that actually start to chip away to a certain extent at the inequity that are experienced by some academics. But in doing that, it needs to have enough Black academics there to support it, in terms of, they need to, when they are part of the race equality charter, they need to have workload allocation. I must say that. But making sure that they are integral to the race equality application in terms of the interventions that are put forward, to make sure that those interventions are fit for purpose in tackling the issues and tackling the barriers that the Black academics face.
And that is where I have a question, because accountability is something that I work on along with Kate. Uh, when we have got multiple charters, how do we make these work and be more accountable so that they have the impact that they are supposed to have? So what can you suggest some of the suggest factors that one can look at, that how do we make it more accountable or make it work so that it makes a difference?
Accountability is key. I'm a review on these charters. I think making sure that there is senior leadership who are responsible for the actions is very key, rather than having people that are who don't have that authority. That's one of the things, making sure that you have that buy-in from senior leadership, those who actually have the power to pass those initiatives and resource those initiatives. That's very important. I think having interim regular review on actions against the action plan is very important, because that builds in accountability. Of, okay, we're 6 months into this, we were supposed to have done this by February 2025. Has it been done? No, it hasn't been done. Okay, what do we need to do then? Rather than getting to December 2025 and,
Yep.
for example. So there's lots of different mechanisms that can be built in to increase that level of accountability.
Yep. Thank you so much, Dr. Yaz. I think you have inspired others to look at some of the points, and there are a lot of reactions in terms of people wanting to join your work, which you have shared your email and the QR codes. I think there will be a lot of emails that will be coming. I thank again you for all the insights that you have shared, and good luck for the further research that is there. I look forward to read on that and work on that. Thank you so much, and thank you everyone for joining us.
Thank you very much.